This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I have the pleasure of having John Mirrione from Harmony by Karate in our network right now. And he's going to tell us about what it took to become an entrepreneur in the space, how martial arts is tried and true, and how he's given back to the community through his foundation. So, John, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. It's an honor to be here with you, Pete.
Excellent. Thank you. So you are going to be one of our Halo evangelists going forward through David Ganelin, who's part of our ISQ team. So, John, why don't you give our listeners a little background on how you came about karate back in New High Park, we're fellow Strong Islander.
Yes.
And how you decided to turn that passion into a profession, and we'll go from there.
I'm excited to share that for sure. But I'll backtrack it, not just from New High Park, but when I started getting bullied in Brooklyn, right? So my martial arts experience began when my stepmother opened the door and saw a bully taking my head and slamming into the curb, and blood was coming out of the back of my head.
Jeez.
And my dad had already begun his karate training with the Japanese. He came home and he was very disturbed by it, and took me to the basement and got a bag and stuffed it with anything he could find, because we were low income at that time. And the training began then. I was doing knuckle push-ups on the concrete at 8 years old, and I was boxing, I was kicking, I was doing, very rigorous workouts. And my mother would leave the door open upstairs. If she didn't hear me hitting the bag, I was grounded. That's how serious it was.
Wow.
And so
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had a half brother, and later on. And then finally, when I had to deal with that same bully, he insisted that we fought on glass at 8 years old. I said, okay. And we got to the glass, and I begun to hit him as fast as I could to his head, kind of like what Sugar Ray Leonard does when he finishes the fight.
Yeah, sure.
Except he was so much bigger, he just kind of fell on me. I'm like, yeah, now what do I do? And then he just looked at me, he got up, and he walked away. And that was the beginning of, setting my soul free from, feeling like you're in the shackles. Like when you're being bullied, you feel like you're stuck, that you can't get out.
I had a situation like that back when I was, 12, and I used to be paranoid and had a significant amount of anxiety, like just walking into school, because you had to pass by the handball court.
Oh, it's the worst feeling.
And you didn't want to disrupt the game, and these guys would come at you, and I was like, wow.
They have serious problems, and many of them have been, bullied by their either siblings or their parents, and they don't even know where to put it, so they just start picking on other people. It's a horrible thing.
Yeah. Well, huge problem. Thankfully, there's more awareness to it.
Yeah, there is
now, but I don't think that's alleviated the problem. I think that's part of growing up, unfortunately.
I got the solution to that problem, and we can talk about that now or later.
Let's talk about it now.
Yeah.
Fire away.
So I'll start with the charity. The Harmony by Karate is my business, and I've been very blessed to be on my own for 23 years, and it's been very profitable because of the integrity that I strive to keep, and not just in my way of doing it, but even the way I do business with people. To me, it's like if you're doing business one way, and you're teaching one way, and you're doing business another way, and that's business. That's bullshit to me, because at the end of the day, you really have to be with that same integrity. Like, I don't do 6 month, 1 year, 2 year contracts. I'm like, 30 days. You don't want to be here, you can leave. In fact, I don't want somebody in my program that doesn't want to be there. So I'm not going to hold them to their payments when they don't want to be there. So, and I think a lot of businesses really struggle with that idea, because they just want to drive them in, keep them, even if they're not happy.
Well, somebody once said to me, I asked them, who's your target customer or member? And his response, and it was like instinctive, he just said, anybody with room on their credit card. And I'm like, that is the wrong answer.
Wow.
Wrong answer.
That really scares me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so to talk about the location up on 81st and Broadway, and how you started that.
Well, we'll backtrack to, I want to answer your question with the charity, and then we'll go back to the business.
You got it.
With the Harmony Power Foundation, having a very successful business, I'm watching bullying happen on television, was so disturbing to me that I simply I said, in my mind, I'm like, I got to get on a plane and go somewhere. I felt like it was psychologically just affecting me, just watching it. And I know that the media does that, but I also know, I'm like, this is happening. This is really going on. And so I got on a plane, went to Chicago, and I hired a publicist, and I said, I need you to follow what I'm doing. I need press everywhere I go.
What year was this?
This was 2010.
Okay.
So I went on Oprah Winfrey's, she had a radio program. I went on that first. And then I went to Chicago, and then I had, the news came and all the NBC, all of that's fun stuff. But at the end of the day, I was in a room full of bullies. It was, not the worst kind of school, but I had to have a talk with them. And they were trying to get rough with me. And I stood up and I said, nobody talks that way in this room. And they all got quiet. And by the time I was done, I went and did my presentation, did my speech to the children. I had all those bullies up in the front row. And at the end, they were helping me with the stage, helping with everything. Then they didn't want to leave because they need the love.
Yeah.
When they don't love themselves, this is what you're going to get.
Right.
So I feel like there's a lot of emphasis on victims. Everybody's a victim, but there's no emphasis on the cause. And you have to do both. So after going to 17 cities, this was years of doing that, I came to the realization that the system is very reactive. They've got a lot of brilliant ways to hurt people and make them feel bad about what they did. It doesn't necessarily correct the issue, right? These kids end up growing up in robbing stores and they end up in jail. This is what usually happens. And I was actually, I did a show with Deepak Chopra. We did a show on bullying. And then I ended up in circles of people you normally wouldn't meet. A lot of politicians, which I'm not a big fan of some of them. And then there are some that you meet that actually are decent people. And I actually met a woman who was powerful, and we had a debate about the gun control law in New Jersey. And she's like, I want to enforce the gun control law in Paterson, and this gun shootings have got to stop. And I looked at her and I said, so what makes you think by doing that it's going to make anything better? I said, they don't care. They just want the attention. And she got a little annoyed with me in the moment. She said, well, what do you intend to do? I said, well, the opposite of what's happening. Because when it doesn't work, then you have to change it. Doesn't mean do more of it in a stronger way. It means do something completely different. Why don't we recognize their positive behavior? Why don't we give them a blueprint of the good things they can do, get rewarded, and it goes in their report card just like they get their grades? I said, that's how you shift an entire culture. So I have the Harmony Power Award program where I'll go into a school and I give the kids 30 days to change the world. And they usually look at me trying to figure out how. Like last year, we were focused on Puerto Rico and sending bottles of water and canned food and whatever things they can do. Or some just create positive message. Sometimes use the artwork to promote positive messages. They'll have what we call a Universal Harmony Day, where they have an event that they're promoting all this positivity. And I'll go and I'll award every single child. I gave out hundreds of awards last year. A few hundred, actually, for kids that were making a difference in the world. And I said, and then goes in the report card. So I'm saying to myself, if you have a city, well, I'm in two cities, in Bayonne and Elizabeth, and they've pretty much made it part of their culture. But if you make that mandatory, which it's ready and begun as a New Jersey bill, it's not official yet, and it's in every city, they have to do that. That means they have to focus on children doing good and give them a blueprint on how they can do it. I can't think of anything more important than that. That's how you solve the problem, because when they learn to give, they believe in themselves. When they believe in themselves, they love themselves, and they have less interest in hurting other people.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Congrats on what you're doing. To talk a little bit more about this report card. What does that look like?
It's just a notation. Harmony Power Award recipient and the year and the date. It's simple as that. Because, you figure if a child doesn't perform very well academically, in these communities, they don't necessarily have the educational support that other communities do have. But they're showing every year that they're actually doing good for their community. I'd hire them, right? Because, you got a do-gooder in your hands. And, if they're fair intelligence and they work hard, I can cultivate them to do a lot of different things. Yeah.
Is part of it also related to making sure people have a safe place to either play sports, do karate? I feel like a lot of people that don't have anything to do, that there's not enough activities, and in this new world you got to pay for everything. So I feel like that's a disadvantage, which leads to, if I've got free time, if I got too much free time and I'm not accountable, then bad things happen.
Well, I think that, the system is making a lot of excuses, and money's always the solution. Let's just throw money at it.
Right.
I was on radio in Jersey with, Christie was throwing $1 million at the bullying situation. They got me on the air to talk about it. And I'm like, okay, you throw $1 million at the situation. First of all, you don't really know how that money's allocated. Who's really doing the accounting and financing on that money? And you have to go into every school to actually research that. The Harmony Power Award program, it's a piece of paper. It's time, right?
Right.
But what's nice too is that everything's on video, so you have to show like what these kids are doing. So there is an accountability, which is more powerful than a piece of paper, right? That's what I liked about what I did. I'm like, you need to show me what these kids are doing, you know. But there are a lot of things that communities can do that are internal to change everything. So it's, once again, people making a whole lot of excuses why they have problems and not doing much of anything. Like the time they take to complain about an issue, get out and volunteer and do something.
Right.
Right. Honestly, if all the time that they tried to complain with actually doing something, we'd have world peace, because it doesn't take much time. If each person gave an hour of their time every week to a child that was in need, you change one child, the ripple effect of that, it's like throwing a pebble in the pond, right?
Sure,
that theory.
sure.
It's powerful. It's far more than you could ever imagine, because that child's affecting so many people throughout their life. So that's why I don't buy into, we need money. No, you don't. What about villages in other parts of the world where they're poor? And you go into some of these places, it's not violent. There's a lot of love in those villages. There's a lot of unity. There's a lot of collaboration, you know. There's one, somebody was telling me something recently. It was amazing to me. I forgot the name of the place in the world, but basically when a child is like really acting out and they're a real troublemaker, the whole village, one by one, has a conversation with that child about how much they're loved. By the end of the day, the child has no more of that hatred and anger. I mean, what does that cost? Really,
Just
think
time.
about it. Just time.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lack of, I don't think people teach anyone how to care. Like
Right.
that people think like you care or you don't care, like that you're born that way. And I feel like that's something that could be learned. And I think if people have responsibility and have accountability and have their own highlight reel, and that's rewarded, then you're going to see change. Some of the things similar to what you're talking about is when I see all these people protesting with signs, and they stand in front of somewhere and they stand there for 6 or 8 hours. I'm like, why don't you go and take all these people and go like clean up a park and use that as like the PR, or like go do like Habitat for Humanity instead of like standing in front of the White House, like go 6 blocks away and like renovate a house.
You're so right what you just said. It triggered a thought. There was the biggest case of bullying. It was a girl named Alicia Gingerella. So my publicist calls me. He says, you got to go on CNN. And, it's pretty bad, but you need to be there. And so I showed up, and ironically, who was in the room was Tony Robbins, and we're just chit-chatting away and just talking. He's talking about himself, and I'm talking about what I'm doing. And then I end up in this room, and I'm like in an empty room, and I'm looking through these cameras, and I'm just trying to figure out like what I'm doing. And finally, the mother gets on the air, the daughter was being bullied, and then somebody's trying to sell a book, right? This is what I'm looking at. This is like the biggest case of bullying. This girl was, I still haven't seen anything quite like this. She basically had brain surgery. 2 weeks later, 3 of her friends pummeled her in the head on the ground. It was over a boy that I guess she liked and they liked or whatever. And as they're beating and punching this kid with brain surgery, there's somebody standing by videotaping it. I'm like, really? Is this like what is really going on? It was very disturbing. So, I was trying to wrap my brain around the fact that these girls would do that. So on the air, everybody was angry. The mother's angry, the book writer's like, all the research and all this stuff. And I just like, look, these kids that did that to this girl can't imagine what they're going through in their house or what they've experienced to actually cause that kind of harm to another human being. And then he was pretty much done with the mother and the book writer, and I was on the air talking, and I'm getting all this publicity. And I go home, and I had a conversation with someone, and I'm like, this is all bullshit. I said, I just had a lot of press, great for me, but this kid's still suffering. And I'm like, I need to go to that school. I need to deal with this kid. I said, and I went to Providence, Rhode Island, and, ABC shows up, and I did 2 assemblies, and, but before the media came, I went and talked to this girl. And I said, your only way out of the way that you feel is to talk about it and to talk about what you don't want to see. You don't want this to happen to someone else. I said, so it's up to you when the media comes in to have that voice, because that voice can change you and how you feel about it and everybody else that's going through it. And she did that, which was, gratifying for me at the moment. But the other reality is 6 months later, even though I spent that time and I tried to stay in touch with that mom, and they tried to do a fundraiser to help her. Her mental health was struggling. She tried to hang herself. She tried to kill. Yeah. And, that's the real thing that happens, you see, So when the media does their thing and they're done, they don't do follow-ups to see how the child's doing. They don't tell the whole story. They tell their little angle, they make their money, they cash in and walk away, which just, to me, is a horrible thing in itself. But I felt that it was a need to step forward and really see what was going on. And that's when I realized that the only way to change the system is through policy, and where people have to do it, whether they like it or not, because there's a lot of lethargic students who don't care because teachers don't care. And there are places that teachers care a lot, and they're out there, and I know those places. But I'd say they're more far and few. It's funny, I had a parent-teacher conference with my son's teacher this year, and I broke down and cried, because when you feel the love of a teacher to the child, it's rare. It's just, can't explain it. You can do all the college in the world, but when you're in a room with kids, what are you really thinking? Do you really care about their job? Well,
it seems to me that you have to. It seems like you're doing that from the grassroots level, but you almost have to change people's perception of what their highlight reel is.
They just don't see the impact they're really having.
Right.
And so when I go to schools, I try to make those teachers aware how deep that really is. I mean, you come into the system knowing that you're going to get a limited paycheck, and it's not what you deserve to get, but you've opted for that. So own your shit. Do what you're supposed to do, and make sure those kids are learning. Not only learning, but make sure that there's heart, your heart energy, not just your brain, how smart you are. What good is a child who's super genius, but they're hateful, they're useless, they're actually even dangerous. So to me, it's they don't focus on the heart energy. That's why the Harmony Power Award program is just one idea to change that whole culture. But there are so many other ideas out there that I've seen that cost nothing and changes everything. So
what other groups have you associated with? Is there the Boys and Girls Club? Who's doing good things? Well,
Boys and Girls Clubs, part of my tour was going to those places. I like them a lot, actually. I think they're really, interesting and fun. I went to one in, where? I'm trying to think of what. It was in the Carolinas. Is North Carolina or South Carolina? And I walk in, and I realize that it's an African-American neighborhood, which I've been to plenty of them, but there wasn't one person that wasn't African-American. I'm like, wow. I'm like, this is going to be great, right? So these kids have hardly even seen a white person, live. So I made a line. I told the person in charge, I said, I need a line of these children. I'm shaking every one of their hands. That's what's got to happen right now. He's like, okay, and that's how it began. And they were kind of skeptical and kind of, but I'm a break dancer too, so I was
So am I, actually.
Seriously?
I am. I used to break dance in my basement in Westbury.
Did you really?
You're probably better than me, though.
Oh, my goodness. That's
I grew up on Run DMC and Public Enemy.
I love Run DMC. I got it on my phone right now. Absolutely.
Yeah, I got my white Adidas breakaway pants.
Oh,
I wore them this morning. I'm not kidding.
I believe you.
Yeah.
I think it's freaking awesome.
Night Train by Public Enemy. I could rap that whole song.
I did.
Separately, not on this podcast.
That is really amazing.
It's true.
Well, I got much to share with you on that. I did the Apollo Theater 4 times myself.
I have done no Apollo Theater.
Yeah, I did Club MTV. I was their choreographer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I did the Joe Franklin show. I traveled the United States Air Force. I'm a veteran, and I traveled. I competed at different levels to become the top performer, and I traveled performing for the troops as a martial arts breakdancer.
That's awesome.
Which is a side note, but yeah, now I'm using that. That's funny. I'm bringing that part up recently, I decided that I wanted to bring the charity to a higher level. So I said, I did all this TV years ago. I said, and I go to different schools. The kids challenge me. They want to see that if I still can dance, and I still do. So I recreated the act. It's better than when I was in my 20s. Wow. And I basically went to America's Got Talent last week, and 50 people in a room, and I was amazed at the talent. And I even said that it was an honor to be amongst great talent. And did my performance, and I talked about the bullying, which is so important. I told my story within 2 minutes. The producer's eyes were lifted up, and then I did the act, and everyone was because I'm 53, so they were just trying to figure it out. 53 and Caucasian, it's all right. And so she's like, all right, if we're interested, we'll call you in February. Nice meeting everybody. Have a great day. And as I'm walking out, everybody's out of the room. I tap on my shoulder. She says, come on in. Somebody says, come in. The producer wants to talk to you. They close the back door. And she's like, yeah, do you have, like, time today? I'm like, what do you need? She's like, we just want to get footage of you dancing, footage of you talking. We just want footage. Can we just do that? And I'm like, I got all day. I stayed there all day. I got all the clips. Now I put on YouTube. And so they'll streamline it through the episodes in the new year. Like it'll be part of their trailer, how they promote it. So it was, and what was nice, I got to talk about anti-bullying and how it connects with America's Got Talent. I kept bringing it back to that show, and it promotes my charity, promotes what I'm trying to do.
Let me ask you one serious question about like the use of the word bully. Like I feel like I don't know, anytime you say like anti-bullying, it's like it allows like the bully to be part of the word. Do you know what I mean? So I wonder if like there's a way to turn it around and be like, hey, we're going to do a class on, caring about other people, or we're going to do a, respecting other, like not even give like the bully like the ability to like be involved in the word. Well,
I don't even like the word, but I guess the word you have to have a starting place with language, right? Otherwise, you're just up in the air. It's like all gray. So you need a starting place.
Fair.
Because a bully is like it's when somebody bullies you, it's a repetitive act that happens from the same person that's either verbal or physical, or physical. But the way you deal with that issue with a bully, like I said earlier, is that they have to learn self-belief. And that comes from them learning about their passion. Like America's Got Talent is all about having goals and finding your passion and your purpose. So they have to go deeper inside, finding their passion and purpose, and finding ways to give to others to heal the pain that they're suffering from. That's the only way you can do it. It's very internal.
So is there a way to systematize that, or how do you do it when you go into these communities and you say?
Well, the award program is a big start because kids that felt like they didn't have a purpose, they could do nothing.
Right.
Found that, hey, I can do something. I actually matter. And what I do is being recognized. In fact, it's not just being recognized, it's permanently in my report card. So I got the Harmony Power Award. So what did you do? It's kind of like,
gotcha.
They feel that sense of confidence. I remember when I was in high school and I did, my way of coming out of the bullying, like there was still a pain I endured, even though I was doing martial arts. I still had that. And it's still in me. It's not like it goes away because it's like I tap into it to have my empathy, right? So you had to tap into your pain. But at that time, I'm like, I was pretty good at one-arm push-ups. I said, let me build that and see where that goes. And I did a high school record. It's still there. I did 63 one-arm push-ups in 37 seconds. And just recently, last week 2 weeks ago to promote the same week as America's Got Talent, I set a world record. I did one-arm push-ups with one leg, with one foot on the chair. So one arm, one leg, and I did 42 in 30 seconds last week, or 2 weeks ago. Was it last week or 2 weeks? I don't remember.
Well, I'm not going to compete with you on that.
Yeah.
I'll help out on everything else, but we're not doing that competition.
It teaches kids to have goals and to believe in themselves. It's not about the push-up. There's always someone bigger, stronger, could do better. No matter who you are, what you think you are, there's always better. But it's about, even at 53, I got a goal, this is what I'm doing. You have to set that example. And I think that's what children need too, right? So they need to look at their mentors and their surroundings and like, what are they doing? What's my motivation for me to do better for myself? What are my teachers doing? What is the gym coach doing? What are people doing in my community that I want to aspire to be better? Because if the only thing they're seeing is television, it may not be enough. It's something, it's better than nothing. And then you have the span of the internet, which, can be kind of sketchy for kids as far as I'm trying to define who they are and what their goals are, right? Yeah.
Well, that's what my friend says, and I mentioned this before, don't believe what the highlight reel is, because that's not reality.
Exactly.
And I think people look at that and say, well, I'm not as good as that highlight reel. Well, it's a highlight reel. It's not life.
That's right.
Yeah. So, John, tell us how you started your own location, Harmony by Karate up on the Upper West Side.
So I began after the Gulf War, I came back and I had some clients I was teaching martial arts to on the side, something I had built up over time. And I decided to enter the health clubs. I figured that would be a good place to start. So I went into the Vertical Club on 61st Street, and that's where, at the time, all the celebrities were there. Everybody was there.
Sure. The one on 61st East Side. Okay.
Yep, exactly. And a guy named Tom DiNatale was the head guy there. who's actually still a close friend of mine today. And, he's been my mentor for many, many years. But I went in that club and I took a job at the front desk. Because I wanted to eventually teach karate. So I'm like, just take whatever job, just connect with people. And I ended up the front desk in sales, opening the club in the morning, and then teaching breakdance classes, teaching martial art classes. But to do the martial art classes, they put me through a whole certification program. I had to do all their personal training certifications. Their Bally's Health and Tennis had its own university. So I had to do all of that just to get on the floor to teach my martial art. And even though I had a black belt and I'd been training for a long time prior to that, it didn't matter. They were like, look, we never did this before. We're concerned about liability. We need to make sure that you are a personal trainer as well. Do you understand the physiology? And so I did that, and then I ended up teaching karate in all the clubs. I was going from one club to the other. I was just club hopping and teaching. My posters were up, and then I was connecting with all the celebrities. I knew Arnold Schwarzenegger and Brooke Shields. I knew all these people by first name, they were just hanging out. It was just a pretty amazing. When I'd go in to teach, and I never forget seeing Elton John and Dustin Hoffman playing tennis. Sensei John, they'd raise their good morning. I said good morning, and that was like a routine, So I was there for about a year. I did that for about a year, and then I decided to go on my own. And in New Jersey, I was in a town called Richfield. I opened up a studio right above a Dunkin' Donuts, which I still drink their coffee.
That's best.
And it was doing good, but I still felt like I needed the city. And I had people coming from Manhattan to New Jersey. I had this guy that worked with all three mayors. He passed away, but he was their right hand. His name was Carlos Rivera. He was their interpreter, Hispanic interpreter. He trained with me, and I was still going in the city to teach at Capitol Records. They created a space for me, and I was teaching the vice president and this other employee, and both of them ended up with black belts from me. They stayed with me the whole ride. In fact, they were a part of helping me get into a place called Reebok Sports Club.
On the west side.
Yeah, so I ended up going back to the clubs because I heard about this amazing club that was going to open, like the Vertical Club, but even bigger and more amazing and all that. Which in some ways it was, but it didn't have the same the density of celebrities in that one place at 61st was never happened again. That was insane. Every hour somebody was coming in, But Reebok was the most amazing experience I've ever had. I will say that because it was 200 athletes worldwide. They wanted one athlete, one sensei. They called a sensei. They wanted a real traditional martial arts program. So I was the first interview, and I was interviewed 200. Wow. And at the end, it was just the last question was why do you want this position? And I said, because these are the leaders of society, and if I want to change the world, I need to teach them.
Wow.
And I didn't realize how true that was going to become. Because when I had my exhibition there, I had people staring at me that I stared at on TV. And it was really very surreal. I was trying to okay, let me just try to sort this out. I'm looking at Bill Beutel at the time, and he was, and Morgan Fairchild's looking at me, and they're just staring. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I'm just performing, doing my thing. And then someone come up to me, and this is symbolic of what I dealt with for 20 years at Reebok. I ended up with my own dojo, my own studio that was exclusively mine. This is how it all panned out. But I had to I worked for that. This person comes up, and it's one of my students. He's shaking, holding a business card. And he said, "You got to teach this person." I said, well, if he wants to learn karate, I'll teach him. He said, "No, you don't understand. He owns the West Side. He owns a lot of buildings, and he's, this building we're in and every building." And I said, well, I'm sure he wants to learn martial arts. And I said, I'll deal with him. He's just a person to me, Right. So I met Marty. His name was Marty Raines, and he owned Raines Realty at the time. And he shows up the next day with a towel over his shoulder and a tennis racket to learn karate. Because he went from one place in the club to the other, just doing different things. And he was stopping to see what I'm about. And so within 30 seconds, he runs off some very big famous martial art names that I used to read about growing up. And he's like, yeah, I paid them and I told them what I wanted to do. That's how we did things together. I says, Marty, I said, I appreciate you sharing that with me. I said, but that's not how we're doing things today. I said, we're going to do this session, and you're going to do what I'm doing. And there won't be any talking until it's over. And if you're okay with that, we'll get started. And that's what we did. And he'd pull his sweat on the ground, and he loved the lesson. He's smiling. So he looks over at my assistant. He said, by the way, I'd like to give a few $1,000s for the sensei. A few $1,000s for the sensei. He said it that way, like it was just nothing. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him, I said, Marty, I said, we haven't even really established a relationship. I said, so why don't you just pay for the session? Let's just see how it goes. Mm-hmm. We have to build a relationship. So he walked away very confused, like he just didn't understand what happened. Someone told him what to do. Someone turned his money away. He was just confused. Mm-hmm. We did this for a month, and I have a certificate of acceptance, like a welcome ceremony when people are welcomed into the school. I still do that to today. Just because you can afford it doesn't mean you're walking in. You have to earn that respect. And I have to earn it too. I have to teach a great class, right? It's both ways. So at the end, I gave him his certificate of acceptance and his uniform, and he's looking at his paper, the certificate, and he's shaking. I said, did I spell your name wrong? Like, what did I do? He said, no one ever turned my money away. Nobody ever told me what to do. It's changing my life. And he's shaking like that, right?
He learned how to listen.
Yeah. And then I said, I need to do something for you. I said, I don't want anything. Just do the lesson. Just leave it like he's no. He said, what you did for me was nothing to you. And what I'm going to do for you is nothing to me and everything to you. He was so right, because he proposed, because I didn't have a car. I was, trying to make ends meet. I was living in Jersey, and I had to shuffle to the city. I had a car take me from New Jersey to the city, my own car, my own driver, with a newspaper and an umbrella. Good morning, Sensei John.
Wow.
Life had changed. Yeah. And that was very symbolic of, the relationships that I built over the years of, I've trained Kevin Bacon's son for 5 years, and, built the relationship with the family, and Kathleen Turner's daughter, and they're wonderful people, and you get to know the real human side of everybody. There are good celebrities, and there's ones that are, have a lot of issues. The children struggle because they're in the shadows, right?
Sure.
So they need a sense of stability in defining who they are separately of their parents. So I'm known a lot for children, but I'm also known for the very high level CEOs and heads of companies. In fact, in 2016, I was the main keynote speaker for General Electric. It was 72 countries, and I did that event, and that was a lot of fun to do, even though they're struggling.
They'll come back.
They'll come back, hopefully. Yeah, so people. That Harmony by Christ, I was at Reebok, and then I left, and when they closed, and I moved to 81st and Broadway, I took a dry cleaner, and I gutted it, and I made it go away, and I got a beautiful studio, and they're very blessed.
That's great. Yeah. Well, it's been an honor to get to know you on the show. I'm sure our audience appreciates everything you're doing, and I think this will resonate as one relationship leads to another relationship, and I do believe that we can change the world. We're doing things with the FDNY right now. Somebody comes up and says, hey, that one piece of fitness equipment in this fire station, is making me a better person, makes me happier. When I get out of when I go to an Uber, I sit in the front seat and I say to the guy, I just need a ride. I don't need a chauffeur. When you open the door for somebody and you say thank you and you look them in the eye, I feel like eye contact, could change the world on its own. So everything you're doing is great, and we look forward to working with you going forward here. And you're now part of the square. So
thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here. Awesome. It really is. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.